Anthony Carey, Function First, creator of Pain-Free Movement Specialist, inventor of Cortex and Cortex Sit. Let's take an exercise, a familiar exercise that we all might do with something simple like a mini band, raise overhead, where we're keeping pressure out on the band. We're doing that for scapular thoracic stability. We're doing it for rotator cuff stuff. We might be doing it to overcome kind of posturally the internal rotation, pronation, and using reflexively the ability to hold supination against the band as we do it, working on external rotation, all these things that we feel that the body needs, right? Well, with Function First and the Pain-Free Movement Specialist, one of the things that we do is we don't always look at just the primary objective of the exercise. That, of course, is important, but what we also want to do is take into consideration a little bit more globally. And that's a big part of how we strategically sequence our exercises and how we incorporate our kind of levels of difficulty or categories of exercise A, B, C, and D. And what I want to go through with you today is a little bit of taking kind of the same move, share with you the different positions and therefore sort of the different considerations you will have in your programming and maybe why you may not want to use it in different positions instead of just thinking about, okay, hey, we're going to do this exercise today because this is a shoulder girdle rotator cuff. Well, what other benefits can I get from it? And equally important, what other potential contraindications or interferences are we going to get that are not in alignment with our objectives with our exercises? So first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through just a level A exercise. So our level A exercise means that I'm on the floor basically. So when I'm on the floor, I don't have to worry about gravitational forces. I don't have to worry about stability. I'm going to be laying down, hook lying on my back, supine with my knees bent. It allows my pelvis and lower back to lay flat. What are the other advantages of doing that same exact move in this position and or differences? Well, one of them is that I'm going to be able to get passive extension from the floor, right? So if I've got issues with my thoracic spine holding more flexion, I can initially get some help because of the fulcrum, right? So that point of contact there is going to get upward pressure from the floor. I can get my client to do some deep diaphragmatic breathing, kind of down-regulate the tone in that tissue, get them to relax those muscles, and then from there, we can perform this exercise, right? Now, what else happens? Well, I get to a certain point where gravity actually assists the arm motion anyway on the way down, but on the way up, I have to overcome gravity as I still maintain this outward pressure. So positionally, where my arms are and the limbs and the length of the limb relative to gravity is going to be influenced. But probably the bigger part of this one is the fact that I can have my cueing and therefore my client's level of intention and focus to be a little bit more intrinsic, right? Because it's a simple level A exercise, and what they can do is they can get that assistance in that thoracic spine that helps them possibly better position that shoulder girdle for the activity at hand. Okay, now we've just progressed to a level C exercise, which is a sitting exercise. So what's the difference here? The primary movement is still the same. Pressure out on the strap. I'm going to go into shoulder flexion and return with shoulder extension. So if I'm going to be sitting, one of the first things that we'll do is we're going to require active sitting here. So obviously my relationship to gravity has changed. I'm going to slightly rotate that pelvis anteriorly so I'm up on my sit bones, which engages all the erectors and paraspinals. So now that's active sitting. So all those muscles that didn't have to do anything got to relax on the floor because they were in a gravity supported position and were getting the passive extension are now doing their job. So now they're working in this position, right? The other primary thing that is different here once I'm here is the relationship of gravity on the lever, right? So nothing changes about the band, but now I have to overcome gravity to bring the arms overhead, and then there's a little bit of an eccentric or deceleration on the way down that I have to work with here, right? So as I'm sitting in this position right now, I'm fully aware that I still have some support. I'm a shorter lever as I'm sitting down, but there is active engagement of the stabilizers, which is a step up, and that's why it's now a level B exercise because of those changes in our relationship to gravity and some of the stability requirements. So now we're still progressing. This particular position, half kneeling, we would consider kind of a B/C because typically a level B is still a kneeling exercise, but it would be an upright kneeling. If I go into a half kneeling position, it changes things a bit from the stability requirements. For one, my base of support is probably a little bit narrow, but also my feet are separated, so it's wider this way. I get no plantar feedback from the knee, although I get it from the bottom of the foot, and how important that is relative to input for stability and corrections within with the balance system. And then, of course, one of the biggest thing, though, is a little bit of the difference in the relationship of the pelvis to the rib cage. This is pretty big, right? So even if I'm going to continue with the same motion, okay, back to my band, and I'm here, still got the gravitational similarities that I had with sitting, raising overhead. But if you're looking at my pelvis right now, my pelvis is this way. And if we were doing this with our client and we're doing it kind of working purely in the sagittal plane in terms of the arms, and the camera is my point of reference, as I do this now, there is a difference in that relationship, right? So therefore, the spinal musculature that's involved, the rotators, or anti-rotators that might be involved, also influence the scapular positioning. So now we're going to get a little bit different in terms of, you know, who's regulated a little bit more on the forward side relative to the pelvis, which is why, of course, if I were doing this with the person, I would likely have them do it on both sides in the half kneeling position. So again, that's a level B going on to a level C because of the stability requirements and because of the change in the relationship of the rib cage to the pelvis. Okay, so now I'm fully vertical on 2 feet. In the function first world and the pain-free movement specialist, technically this is a D level exercise because I don't have a third point of contact if I'm standing up. So we've gone from BC right to D. Now if I did want to make this exercise and repeat this exercise standing like this, one of the things that I could do is I could add another point of contact or base of support. So my butt is touching the wall now. That gives me additional stability, and it may limit some other aspects of the exercise, but it gives me the stability I might need. So if I'm working with somebody that has balance challenges, and one of the things that we're going to do is have them follow their eyes with the exercise, I might want to give them that base of support. But let's take a look at this now. So what's one of the other things that happens here? So for a lot of people who have issues with being able to get into thoracic extension, what do? They borrow from the lumbar spine and the hip. So they try to get a little bit of extra extension. So if I get stuck here, do I get more range of motion and therefore think to myself I'm doing better because I've done this? Okay, have I extended there and because I transferred that responsibility? Or is that actually something I want to program in for somebody, that I want them to be able to access that hip extension, load the abdominals and the front butt here that they talk about in the Gray Institute, so that we can get a little bit more of that motion through there? Depends. What are our favorite questions? For whom, for what, and when? Right? So as I calculate why and how and when I'm going to do this exercise and what this client needs, all these things are going to come into play into my decision-making process. And then finally, what actually still falls into the D category is if we introduce an unstable or labile surface where the client has a little bit more going on, right? So I could repeat this exercise either on the BOSU, okay, which is a conforming surface and the response is a little bit different. You know, if I'm a little bit more advanced cortex user and I don't need the handrail, I can do the same thing on this product. So what's the difference between the ground and here? Obviously is the increase in co-contraction for stabilization, and obviously depending on the competency of the client, you would or you wouldn't use something like this, or you could go from as simple as an AirX pad or something softer to something a little bit more advanced like this if you wanted it. But from the principle standpoint, we're going to get an upregulation of stabilization, right? So the body's going to start to co-contract. The more incompetent or inefficient I am at it, the greater amount of co-contraction is going to occur for safety, which then is probably going to interfere with the quality of motion I want. But one of the things that we look at as a whole also is, again, scaling this as needed for the client's ability, is the variability that will be introduced. So whether I'm on the BOSU, whether I'm on the AirX and I'm standing, or I'm on the Cortex and I'm standing, what's going to happen? There's going to be changes in the pelvic platform as I do that. So what does that influence? That influences the vertebral column, and the muscles associated with that. And therefore, if I'm always trying to keep command central still here, and my arms and my shoulder girdle are responding or reacting to the changes down here, I'm introducing that variability to the motor system and to the joints and to the muscles as they need to adequately execute what we're looking to execute with. So to quickly summarize all this, guys, one of the things that I think will bring great value to your programming is going beyond that specific segment or quadrant of the body that you're thinking about when you're programming, and extend it out and see what are the advantages and disadvantages to using different positions and the impact that has on that primary movement that you're looking to do. So again, because we work with people in chronic pain, and we're not treating things, so we're not giving a, somebody's not coming us to get low back exercises. There may be some overlap in that, but we're also looking at where do we get the biggest bang for our buck, right? We look at that 80-20 principle and how that is integrated into our decision-making process for the choice of exercise selections, and then how we strategically sequence them, and how that ascends into getting the motor system more involved and building that movement confidence in that person and influencing their movement in a positive way. So when you think outside of that primary movement, you gain advantages into moving that person along faster into more fully integrated movements, which is the ultimate goal, transfer into traditional fitness and sports activities, and then everybody's happy. Thanks for watching. I'm Anthony Carey.